10 skydivers boarded a plane in Hawaii for one last sunset jump. Minutes later, the aircraft rolled inverted and crashed, killing everyone on board. This was not fate. It was the deadliest skydiving plane crash in U.S. history, caused by reckless mistakes and ignored warning. Imagine a plane full of skydivers leaping into the open sky. For a few seconds, everything feels normal.
Yippee!
Then chaos hits. The pilot loses control, and a section of the tail breaks off mid-air. The jumpers escape, but the airplane barely survives. That frightening event should have been a warning. But 3 years later, the very same aircraft went up again with 10 people on board. This time, there was no escape.
No, we're going down.
What came down was twisted metal and shattered lives. This was not an act of fate. It was the result of reckless decisions stacked one on top of another. And when all those cracks finally lined up, 10 lives vanished in an instant. On June 21, 2019, 10 skydivers boarded a twin-engine aircraft in Hawaii, hoping to make one last sunset jump. The plane lifted off, but seconds later, it banked hard to the left. In a flash, it rolled inverted and smashed into the ground near a busy road. There were no survivors. The victims included seasoned instructors, thrill seekers chasing one more leap, and even a young couple celebrating their first anniversary. They had planned for joy, but found tragedy instead. At the controls sat 42-year-old Jerome, a pilot with a history that would later shock investigators. To understand how this happened, we have to rewind almost 3 years earlier. In July 2016, in Byron, California, 14 skydivers boarded the same model of aircraft. The pilot had only a handful of hours on this type. At 12,000 feet, the plane slowed too much, turned left, and snapped into a spin. Instead of following the standard recovery checklist, the pilot mishandled the controls. The plane accelerated dangerously, tossing jumpers around. Then came a thunderous crack. The tail structure snapped in flight. The skydivers bailed out, and somehow the pilot forced the crippled aircraft back to the ground. That day ended in relief. But the seeds of a much greater disaster had already been planted. The owner of the airplane, Patrick, ordered repairs. It took nearly a year, but the fixes were far from proper. Investigators later found that an unauthorized replacement part had been installed. A twisted wing was never corrected. One mechanic even wrote that the aircraft was unsafe, only for another to approve it weeks later. Photos from the ferry flight to Hawaii revealed ripples in the wing skin, crooked panels, and gaps around the engine. Yet, despite these red flags, the plane was leased to a new skydiving operator in Hawaii. Jerome's path as a pilot was anything but steady. In 2017, he began training. Within 8 months, he failed 3 major check rides, private, instrument, and multi-engine, before eventually scraping through each on retests. Instead of mastering basics in small trainers, Jerome logged dozens of hours in a King Air. Often he sat in the right seat without flight controls, yet marked those hours as if he was the one in command. On paper, he appeared qualified. In reality, he had rushed through, cut corners, and carried gaps in experience that would later prove deadly. The Oahu Parachute Center, the company operating the aircraft, had problems of its own. The owner, George, had previously lost his pilot license for dishonesty. When he started this business, he relied on contract workers, pilots, mechanics, and instructors, without a structured training system. New pilots like Jerome were expected to watch online tutorials and learn on the job. Jerome's official training flights could be counted on one hand. Yet within weeks, he was carrying loads of paying skydivers. Safety had taken a back seat to keeping the airplane flying. Maintenance was in the hands of Bobby, a mechanic whose record was stained. His license had once been revoked for falsifying records, later reinstated. Bobby often claimed the aircraft was fine, but he left no paperwork. He got paid through casual texts. At times, Jerome himself carried out work he wasn't qualified to perform. Inspections were incomplete. Required daily engine washes went undocumented, Structural problems remained ignored. Months after the Hawaii tragedy, another plane serviced by Bobby crashed, killing its pilot. This time, regulators permanently stripped his license. But for the 10 victims in Hawaii, that justice came too late. On the evening of June 21, 2019, 8 skydivers boarded. 2 more rushed in at the last moment, pushing the total to 10. The company's weight calculations ignored the heavy parachute gear. In truth, the plane was flying overloaded and with a dangerously aft center of gravity. Airport rules required departures to the north, avoiding homes and parks. Jerome instead chose a short intersection takeoff, reducing his safety margin even further. Everything about this flight was stacked against survival. Witnesses had already noticed Jerome's flying habits. He pitched the airplane steeply, banked hard, and performed negative G dives for fun. Some passengers complained. Fellow pilots warned him. He dismissed it all. One pilot said Jerome bragged about rolling the airplane in flight. The day before the crash, a Canadian Air Force officer watched his departure and thought it was dangerously aggressive. What began as small risks had become routine. Each thrill made the next one easier to justify. The line between confidence and recklessness had disappeared. On that final flight, the King Air lifted off with too much weight and too little margin. At just 100 feet, Jerome pulled into a sharp left bank, 66 degrees. The twisted wing stalled first, and the aircraft rolled inverted. Some unbelted passengers slid backward, shifting the balance even further out of control. Seconds later, the plane slammed into the ground. Investigators concluded that Jerome's aggressive maneuver caused the stall. But the real story was bigger. Shady repairs, poor oversight, a negligent company, a reckless pilot, and regulators who failed to intervene. In the end, every hole in the safety net lined up. 10 people lost their lives not because of one mistake, but because of many. The lesson is simple but unforgiving. In aviation, there are no shortcuts. Every corner cut, every ignored rule, and every careless action brings the day of disaster closer. On June 21, 2019, that day arrived. This tragedy wasn't written by fate. It was written by human hands, by negligence, pressure, and pride. Each checklist skipped, each warning silenced, each risk normalized, until all of them aligned in one final irreversible moment. But even in that silence, there's a message carved in the clouds. In aviation, every rule has a reason, because the sky never forgives. If this story moved you, share it, because every share, every comment keeps these lessons alive. Subscribe for more true aviation stories, each told to honor those who paid the price and to remind us all why safety can never be optional. 10 souls, one warning written in the sky. This was the final flight.